Well, Milton is now post-tropical and is off the southeast coast and moving away to the east, and we can see mostly calmer weather going forward, but there will be some changes ahead, including a colder air mass coming into the eastern U.S. This will be the coldest air mass of the autumn season so far. So let's get started on tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And you can support the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, especially now with another Prime Day coming up on Amazon. Use the referral link on the description to this podcast and just get in there, use the search bar, get your stuff. Amazon will throw us back a little bit of coin for sending you there, and it doesn't cost you anything. And we certainly do appreciate your support. Good evening, everybody. It's the Joe and Joe Weather Show minus one Joe tonight, and that is because uh, if you haven't looked out your window toward the north and northwest, you're missing the aurora. I mean, the solar storm was uh, far stronger than originally indicated, and in fact, even here in the deep south, we should be able to see it. So Joe's busy. Just called me a few minutes ago saying he's just busy looking at the aurora and fielding phone calls from all the astronomy enthusiasts. When we're going to keep the show short tonight, and this way everybody can get a chance to take a look at what's going on in the skies because we don't get to see things like this very often. Welcome to everybody on the chat board tonight. Welcome to those of you who are on the new to the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. We appreciate you being here. Subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss us because we're here Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you like the show, hit the like button. By the way, if you do subscribe, turn your notifications on so you don't miss us. Um, let's see. Okay, thank you, Darlene. Darlene Johnson, thank you so much for your comment on the chat board tonight. It's been a crazy 3 or 4 days. I actually had debated about whether to just take the night off, but decided to go ahead with the show tonight. We do have a rather calm and quiet weather pattern ahead, but it's been just an uh, incredible and devastating couple of days with Hurricane Milton. 38, I believe it's 38 tornadoes now in Florida that were confirmed in Florida, which is a record. I think 133 tornado warnings were issued, which was something that you might expect it to see in Iowa or Nebraska, somewhere in the traditional areas of Tornado Alley. But this was just one exceptional storm on so many levels. No, it didn't come ashore as a Cat 5, thankfully. Came in as a Cat 3. There was quite a bit of damage you may probably have seen Tropicana Stadium in Tampa had the whole roof ripped off. There was, numerous damage to homes. The tornadoes were especially damaging because there were a lot of EF2 and EF3 tornadoes in the mix there in Central and South Florida yesterday. I thought that we talked about tornadic activity going back to Monday of this week in South Florida. I never could have imagined that it would have been elevated, but it's hard to fathom the fact that the tornado activity was as active as it turned out. I mean, that really was astounding. But you had a ton of energy and a ton of dynamics in play. Winds that gusted in a number of locations over 100 miles an hour, even on the East Coast. When I woke up this morning, the first observation I happened to look at was Melbourne, Florida, at 7 o'clock this morning. They were gusting to 80 miles an hour there, and they got into what's known as the sting jet. When you have a system that's starting to go extratropical, there's a jet that wraps around the backside and it causes big gusty winds. Just to give you a very simplistic answer about it, uh, but it was in play, and it certainly caused a lot of wind across central and western Florida, obviously with the hurricane, but also during the overnight, and then this morning when the storm was moving off the coast, the northwest winds in some places were worse than the winds that turned out to be ahead of it, and those themselves were quite gusty. The rainfalls were incredible, uh, up to 20 inches or more of rain in and around Tampa. There was a lot of rainfall, into, freshwater rainfall flooding. The surge, thankfully, the storm coming ashore about 4 to 5 hours earlier than what was being figured on earlier in the day was a bit of a blessing because it did come during the lower part of the tide cycle. So that helped to keep the surge down. It was maybe a little more than half of what it might have been had it happened at high tide, but there was still some tidal surge damage regardless, with some places experiencing surges of 5 and 6 feet. But it certainly could have been a lot worse than it was. So let's take a look at what's going on tonight. We do have, the next real. We don't have any tropical systems to worry about really in the short or the medium range, so that's good. We do have frost advisories up for a good chunk of Pennsylvania, most of New Jersey, except the counties around New York City, in upstate New York, from the Catskills into central New York and southern New York, and a few counties even in northeastern New York and western Mass and northwest Connecticut. Frost advisories that extend down through Virginia and West Virginia and Western Virginia and Western North Carolina, as well as Eastern Ohio. But much of the rest of the country is on the quiet side, and I think you're going to see on the satellite loop that it bears that out. Most of the nation enjoying mainly clear skies, and it's nice that it's clear tonight in eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, certainly points south with the aurora display that is underway. We've got a few clouds in upstate New York, though, mainly north of I-90, and in Vermont, New Hampshire is a little trough that's moving southeastward from Canada into northern New England. You could see the remnant post-tropical low that was Milton, and that is moving out to the east northeast on a steady pace, and it's just going to keep on going. So no worries there. And at least for now, the Gulf of Mexico is quiet, the Caribbean is quiet, and we don't have to worry about tropical cyclone formation. Radars are actually quite inactive. A few showers in western Maine tonight. We have also a few showers going on in northernmost North Dakota. All of this is light stuff in parts of Montana and into Idaho. We have a speckling of showers in southeast Arizona and southwest New Mexico, also in parts of northwest Texas and into Oklahoma. But none of this is causing any big problems. The Storm Prediction Center has no severe thunderstorms forecast for tonight, nor do they have any severe weather forecast for tomorrow. There's a couple of small areas in the northern Great Lakes and in eastern Oklahoma, northeast Texas, where they have general thunderstorm activity indicated. And then Saturday into Sunday, from eastern Iowa east into westernmost Pennsylvania, southern Michigan, and southern Wisconsin. And this is with this next cold front that's moving eastward that we have an area of potentially general thunderstorms. But again, at this time, we don't have any severe weather. And notice that through most of the country, it is going to be bone dry for the next 7 days. The exception will be upstate New York, southern New York to along and east of I-90 and points northward, where you might see a half to three-quarters of an inch, up to in central and northern New England. A little bit less when you get down into Massachusetts and in parts of northern Pennsylvania, where we see a quarter of an inch. And everybody else, southern New England, a tenth maybe or less. Same for the Hudson Valley. Most of New Jersey, no rain. And then it's mostly dry down to Florida and mostly dry west back through all of the plains and into the southwest. A little bit of activity kicking up in the Pacific Northwest, where we see uh, rainfall amounts of up to an inch and a half to 2 inches spread out over the next 7 days. So we're not really, looking at a whole lot here. In fact, before we even do this, let me switch over to the upper air, and we have this deep trough that's from Atlantic Canada down to the coast of the Carolinas. The little circle that you see off of Florida represents the post-tropical system of Milton. That trough is responsible for kicking this out to the east. Never was going to be a problem for the East Coast. Not when you have upper air winds like this, where you're having northwest winds up and down the eastern seaboard. There's just no way you're going to get a system to come up the coast with that. That will pull out, and we do have a fairly active northwest flow here out of Canada. So this is going to be the primary driver. There's a weak ridge down in the southwest and over the Baja Peninsula, and other than that, it's basically westerly winds that are going to be, or northwest northwest winds in the upper atmosphere that are going to be in charge. And there's a short wave, and you can see the expanding blue area there in south central Canada to the Great Lakes. That is the next upper trough that drives down to the east and actually deepens or intensifies there in eastern Canada. This is going to bring a significant shot of colder air to the entire East Coast. Um, Very dynamic upper air here setup. So we're going to see some colder than normal temperatures taking over in the east, and that includes areas down into the southeast and into Florida. Now, this particular model run is trying to take the bottom of that trough and forming a cutoff low, and you see it there in Alabama and Georgia for during the middle part of next week, and then trying to lift that up the East Coast late next week. There's there's this is not a tropical system. This is a non-tropical system. It might, if this were to verify, perhaps toward the end of next week, it could bring an area of much needed rain. We actually have some drought conditions developing in parts of New Jersey, for example, and elsewhere. That, if it lifts up, could be the next important rain event. And then once that pulls out, we'll have a bit of a ridge position in place. And then another trough is going to move into the eastern part of the United States. This pattern is an interesting one because it's a sort of a fast moving west to east pattern. So you'll get shots of chilly air followed by brief warm ups, then another shot of chilly air. Here comes another one as we get toward the last week of October. And then once again, you get a ridge building and then maybe another trough that comes in behind it. Now, I know a lot of you have probably seen because it's already there, and we talked about this yesterday with respect to any additional any new tropical storm development coming in the future. We do have this persistent gyre of moisture over the Central America that keeps spitting out disturbances, and uh, the models are doing, they are trying to spin up a low, but not till later next week. So there's a lot of uncertainty here. Uh, Maybe not so much the spinning up type, but ultimately where something like this would wind up if it were to develop. And the GFS is bullish on development. The European shows something down there as well. So this is where they've been coming from. So there's no reason to believe that there wouldn't be another storm system that comes out from the Caribbean, but it's a week away. So when we come back on Sunday, we'll probably have a better idea of what's happening down there. And this is what the surface looks like. You have your post tropical Milton going out and goodbye. You have the next upper trough moving into the east. This weak trough that's coming, there's one that's coming through Friday night into Saturday that goes by mostly to the north, and you see the rain that's up in northern New England. I got to switch this to the one that shows the snow too, because that is colder air in Canada. So now we have that stronger trough that swings eastward, and here comes a pretty sizable high. Looks like we'll warm up Saturday, and I think Sunday could be a fairly warm day with temperatures in the 70s before the front passes. Maybe when the front passes Sunday night, there might be a shower with it. It doesn't look especially bullish for rain here. And then after that, in comes the chilly air for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week. In fact, I'm expecting to see widespread uh, frosts and maybe some freezes, depending on the wind and depending on your location. And also, could be the first snows, so maybe a little bit of lake effect action possible. Nothing of consequence really, because it's a cold air mass, but it's just we're just not deep enough into October for this. And maybe even a few snowflakes that'll fall in northern New England and certainly in eastern Canada. but it is a cold high, and you can see with the system off the southeast coast that the GFS wants to bring it up the coast with some rain late next week. We can see what the European did with this, and the European does not do the same thing. It pretty much ejects that southern energy. It tries to form a low along about Tuesday, well east of North Carolina, and takes it out to the east. So the European would imply that it would just be cold and dry, followed by a warm up before the next trough and cold front approach. And you'll notice that we do have the model showing some kind of a low in the south central Gulf of Mexico on days 9 and 10. Too far out to really begin to speculate regarding what could come of it, if anything could come of it. Because you got to remember, um, this high coming down is is a significant shot of cold and, more importantly, dry air that gets all the way down into Florida and into the Gulf of Mexico. So that is going to be a big factor here because if we've got a dry high that's sitting in the southeastern part of the United States with all kinds of dry air across the Gulf, it's going to be pretty hard for a tropical system to develop in that environment. So that's a big variable here, and that's why I wouldn't overly speculate on anything the model does with this because that high dropping southward is going to be a very important player for any future tropical cyclone formation. So, as far as the long range goes, we can take a look at the upper air and see what that tells us. And overall, you've got this setup here for next week. You've got this very strong cutoff low in the Gulf of Alaska. You've got ridging in the west going up into Western Canada and a deep upper low and trough in the east. So it's a perfect setup for an important shot of cold air. And then that lifts out. We go into that temporary ridge position. And then another trough tries to drop down off the Pacific Northwest and into the southwestern part of Canada. We also have a short wave on the European that drops down into the middle of the country. And if we take it out the GFS, we can go out a few more days. The GFS wants to drop it down into the southwest. So there's a big difference there. And then you have this lifting up, another trough coming into the east around the 21st, 22nd. Another ridge in the west. Very interesting that the setups right now are showing up with these deep troughs that want to be in the eastern part of the United States, with a ridge in the west and a trough in the Gulf of Alaska. Okay, uh, that is something that uh, would be important when we get into the closer to the winter time, because it is a pattern that would bring down colder air into the eastern United States, and it it might be one of these things, setups. If these troughs pull out, they're replaced by other troughs behind it, which would keep it colder for longer periods of time. But again, this is sort of speculative here. But it's kind of interesting to see a setup like this, very high amplitude setup, big ridges going up in the west, deep troughs dropping down into the eastern United States. But unless that the GFS is right about bringing something up the coast late next week, it could conceivably be dry all of next week and through next weekend, other than maybe a shower or two Sunday night and maybe some scattered instability showers in the cold air in inland areas that could pop up uh, Monday or even into early Tuesday until the whole eastern trough pulls away to the northeast. So Mr. Rayo he said he might try to come on, but I'm thinking he's got his hands full with this aurora. So what I am going to do is I'm going to end the show early tonight and encourage everybody because you have clear skies, okay? So take advantage of it. If you're anywhere in the east, except for well up into upstate New York and northern New England, you have clear skies. You're going to be seeing quite a show here now that we're past sunset. So Joe's very happy about this. Okay, so I'm telling you now. Uh, take the opportunity if you can. If you can get away from the light pollution, even better. So you can go outside now, Jason Schaefer, because he's already seeing a beautiful show up in the northern northwest sky. So hold on, Christinapedia. So Ms. Christinapedia says has a shot here. Uh, this is a picture that her sister took uh, just now in Rocky Point. Thank you for sending that, Christinapedia. So here it is. So that's what it looks like outside by her in Rocky Point on Long Island. So take advantage here. This is a great opportunity. If you missed it when we had this back a few months ago, you're getting a second chance to see an aurora because we don't get to see this sort of thing. And certainly here in the South, in North Georgia, it's even that event back a couple of months ago. We were able to see it here, and I actually think I'm going to probably take a ride up to the dam here, which is wide open with no light pollution, and see if there's anything uh, going on. So everybody, go see the aurora. We'll be back. Both of us will be back Sunday night at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time. Have a great Friday and a great weekend, and we'll see you on Sunday. Night.